Ethan Cole had spent most of his life believing that the past should stay buried. It was easier that way. Easier to ride across dry grasslands with his black hat pulled low, his red plaid shirt covered by a dark vest, and his eyes fixed on the road ahead. Easier to work cattle, mend fences, sleep beneath open skies, and never stay long enough in one place for memories to catch him. But on a lonely trail west of Red Creek, with the sun sinking behind rocky hills and the wind carrying dust across the land, Ethan saw something that made him stop his horse. At first, he thought it was an abandoned coat caught in the brush. Then the shape moved. A woman lay on the ground near a narrow path, almost hidden between tall grass and stones. Her worn brown jacket was torn at the sleeve, and her frontier dress was covered in dust. Her face was pale beneath strands of dark hair, but one hand was tightly closed around a small brass key. Ethan climbed down from his horse and knelt beside her. "Ma'am," he asked. Her eyes opened slowly. They were tired, frightened, and somehow still brave. "Don't take the key," she whispered. Ethan looked at her hand. "I'm not here to take anything." She tried to push herself up, but pain crossed her face. Ethan saw blood soaking through the side of her dress. The wound was old enough that she had already lost too much strength, but fresh enough that she needed help quickly. "There's a cabin," she said, her voice barely holding together. "Behind the ridge. You have to take me there." Ethan looked toward the hills. There was no cabin in sight, no chimney smoke, no trail wide enough for a wagon. "Can you ride?" he asked. She gave a weak nod. Ethan lifted her carefully onto his horse, climbed behind her, and followed the direction she gave him. The path twisted through rocks and dry brush until it disappeared beneath the shadow of a narrow valley. Then Ethan saw it, a small wooden cabin hidden between two rocky slopes, nearly invisible from the open land. It had a sagging porch, a hand pump beside the door, and one narrow window glowing with the last light of day. Whoever had built it had not wanted to be found. Inside, the cabin was simple but clean. There was a bed, a stove, shelves filled with jars, and a small table with a lamp. Ethan laid the woman down gently and searched for cloth to stop the bleeding. She watched him through half-closed eyes. "You shouldn't have followed me," she said. "You would have died out there," Ethan replied. "Maybe that would have been easier." Ethan looked at her sharply. "Don't say that." The woman gave a faint, sad smile. "You don't know what I've done. I know you're hurt. That's not the same thing." Ethan worked in silence, cleaning the wound and wrapping it as best he could. He had seen injuries before. He knew enough to understand that she might not survive unless a doctor reached her soon. But the nearest town was nearly a day away, and night had already swallowed the trail. "What's your name?" he asked. She stared at the ceiling for a moment. "Lydia." "Lydia what?" Her fingers closed more tightly around the brass key. "Just Lydia." Outside, the wind rose. Ethan lit the stove, boiled water, and made broth from the small supplies he found. He told himself he was only staying until morning. He told himself this was not his business. But when Lydia woke in the middle of the night, calling out in fear, Ethan was sitting beside the bed before he even understood why. "He'll find me," she whispered. "Who?" Ethan asked. Lydia looked toward the locked cabin door. "The man who took everything from me." Ethan did not press her. He had learned that fear had its own language, and people only spoke the truth when they felt safe enough to do so. By dawn, Lydia's fever had worsened. Ethan prepared to ride for help, but when he reached for the door, Lydia grabbed his wrist. Her hand was weak, but her eyes were desperate. "If I don't wake up," she said. "Use the key." Ethan looked at the brass key in her palm. "What does it open?" Lydia swallowed hard. "The box beneath the floorboards." "What's in it?" Tears filled her eyes. "The truth about your father." Ethan froze. The room seemed to grow colder despite the fire. His father had died 15 years earlier, accused of stealing money from the Red Creek Bank before disappearing into the hills. Ethan had spent years carrying the shame of that accusation. It was the reason he left town. It was the reason he never trusted anyone's kindness. "You knew my father?" he asked. Lydia's eyes drifted closed. "I knew what happened to him." Then she whispered, "And I'm sorry." If this mystery has pulled you into Ethan and Lydia's story, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. The hidden cabin held more than a dying woman's secret. It held the truth that could change a lonely cowboy's life forever. Ethan did not sleep after Lydia spoke his father's name. He sat beside the fire while the first pale light entered the cabin, staring at the brass key resting on the table. He remembered his father, Samuel Cole, as a quiet rancher with strong hands and a gentle voice. Samuel had taught Ethan how to ride, how to track cattle, and how to treat people fairly even when life was unfair to them. Then one autumn morning, the sheriff came to their ranch with 3 men and a warrant. The bank in Red Creek had been robbed. Samuel was accused because he had been seen near town the night before. He swore he was innocent, but no one listened. By sunset, he was gone. Some said he ran. Others said he died in the hills. Ethan's mother had never recovered from the shame, and Ethan had grown up with anger where love should have been. Now, 15 years later, a dying stranger had told him she knew the truth. Lydia slept restlessly as Ethan searched the cabin. He found the loose floorboard beneath the bed, exactly where she had said it would be. The brass key opened a small iron box hidden below the wood. Inside were letters tied with twine, an old silver pocket watch, a faded photograph, and a ledger wrapped in cloth. Ethan opened the photograph first. It showed his father standing beside a younger woman. The woman was Lydia. She looked barely 20, smiling nervously at the camera. Ethan's hands began to shake. He opened one of the letters. It was written in Samuel's handwriting. The letter explained that Samuel had discovered the bank owner, Walter Brigg, had been stealing money from ranchers and blaming anyone who questioned him. Lydia had worked as a clerk at the bank. She had seen the false records. Samuel had promised to help her bring the truth to the sheriff, but Brigg learned of their plan. He arranged the robbery, planted evidence against Samuel, and threatened Lydia if she spoke. Ethan read the final line twice. If anything happens to me, Lydia must not be blamed. She is only trying to survive. Ethan felt the years inside him crack open. His father had not abandoned him. He had been protecting someone. He had been betrayed. Ethan looked toward Lydia, and anger rose in him. Why had she waited so long? Why had she allowed his family to live with that lie? But when he saw her pale face and the scars on her hands, another truth came with the anger. Lydia had been afraid for 15 years. She had built a cabin in the middle of nowhere, because fear had become the only home she knew. By noon, Lydia woke and found Ethan standing near the window. "You opened it," she said. "You knew," he replied. His voice was controlled, but pain filled every word. "You knew my father was innocent." Lydia turned her face away. "I was young. Walter Brigg had men everywhere. He told me if I spoke, he would kill me. Then he told me Samuel was dead, and you believed him. I was terrified." Ethan wanted to shout. He wanted to demand every answer. But Lydia began coughing violently, and when he saw blood on the cloth she held to her lips, his anger turned to fear. "Why did you come back?" he asked quietly. Lydia looked at him. "Because I heard Brigg was dead. Because I heard you had left Red Creek and carried your father's shame with you. I wanted to find you." "Why?" "Because Samuel saved my life," she whispered. "And I owed him the truth." Ethan sat beside her. "You don't owe me anything." Lydia smiled weakly. "Maybe not. But I wanted to give you something your father would have wanted you to have." Ethan took her hand. "You're going to tell the sheriff yourself." Lydia shook her head. "I don't think I have enough time." Ethan refused to accept that. He saddled his horse and prepared to ride to town for the doctor, but Lydia stopped him again. "There are men looking for this box," she said. "Brigg may be dead, but his son runs the bank now. He knows the ledger exists." Ethan looked outside. In the distance, dust rose beyond the ridge. Riders. 3 of them. Lydia saw them too, and fear filled her face. "They found me." Ethan moved quickly. He hid the box beneath his coat, checked the rifle hanging near the door, and barred the cabin. "You stay here," he said. "I'm not letting anyone take you." Lydia looked at him with tears in her eyes. "Why are you helping me after everything?" Ethan looked back at her. "Because my father did." The riders reached the cabin just before sunset. Their leader was a hard-faced man in a gray coat, Walter Brigg's son Thomas. He smiled when Ethan opened the door. "I'm looking for a woman," Thomas said. "And something she stole." Ethan stood in the doorway, black hat low over his eyes. "No one here but me." Thomas looked past him toward the cabin. "You don't want to lie for her. She's dangerous." Ethan's hand rested near his rifle. "The only dangerous men I see are standing in my yard." The wind moved through the valley. Thomas's smile disappeared. "You don't know what you're protecting." Ethan's voice was steady. "I know exactly what I'm protecting." And for the first time since his father disappeared, Ethan was not running from the past. He was standing in front of it. Thomas Brigg did not leave easily. He stood outside the cabin as the sun dropped behind the rocky hills, his men spreading out across the small valley. Ethan knew he could not win a long fight alone, especially with Lydia too weak to move. But he also knew the hidden trail behind the cabin led toward an old mining road that connected to Red Creek. If he could get Lydia there, he could reach the sheriff and expose the ledger before Thomas took it. He waited until darkness covered the valley, then slipped out the back window with Lydia wrapped in a blanket. She could barely stand, but she leaned against him with every ounce of strength she had left. They moved through the rocks while Thomas and his men searched the cabin. Ethan guided Lydia toward his horse, but a gunshot shattered the night. A bullet struck the ground beside them. Thomas had seen them. Ethan lifted Lydia onto the horse and led it through the narrow trail as shots echoed behind them. The horse climbed hard over the ridge, hooves slipping on loose stone. Lydia held tightly to Ethan's coat, her breath weak against his back. "Leave me?" she whispered. "No," Ethan said. "You came back for me." "I don't want you to die because of me." Ethan looked over his shoulder. "You're not dying because of anyone." They reached the mining road near dawn, but Thomas was still following. Ethan knew he needed help. He rode faster than he ever had, carrying Lydia through cold wind and rising dust until the rooftops of Red Creek appeared in the distance. The sheriff was standing outside his office when Ethan arrived. At first, Sheriff Boone looked suspicious. He remembered Ethan as the son of the accused bank robber. But when Ethan placed the ledger, letters, and pocket watch on his desk, the old sheriff's face changed. He read Samuel Cole's words in silence. Then he opened the ledger and found records of stolen deposits, false signatures, and payments made to Thomas Brigg. "My father was innocent?" Ethan said. Sheriff Boone looked at him with regret. "Yes," he said. "He was." Before more could be said, Thomas Brigg rode into town with his men. He claimed Ethan had stolen the ledger and kidnapped Lydia. But Lydia, weak and pale, stepped out of the sheriff's office and faced the crowd gathering in the street. Her voice trembled at first, but she spoke clearly. She told them about Walter Briggs' threats. She told them about Samuel Cole trying to protect her. She told them how she had hidden for years because she was afraid. Then she looked at Thomas. "Your father destroyed innocent lives," she said, "and you helped him bury the truth." Thomas tried to deny it, but the ledger could not lie. The sheriff arrested him before sunset. As the crowd slowly disappeared, Ethan stood beside Lydia near the edge of town. The truth had finally been spoken. His father's name would be cleared. Yet Ethan could not feel complete joy because Lydia was growing weaker by the hour. The doctor examined her and told Ethan quietly that the wound and illness had gone too far. Lydia had only days, perhaps less. Ethan brought her back to the hidden cabin because she asked to see it one more time. The valley was peaceful now. The golden sky glowed over the dry grasslands, and the cabin looked less like a prison than it had before. Lydia sat on the porch, wrapped in a blanket, while Ethan repaired the broken step. "You don't have to fix that," she said. Ethan looked up. "I know." Lydia smiled. "You sound like your father." Ethan sat beside her. For a while, they watched the sun sink behind the hills. "I spent so many years angry at you," Ethan admitted. "I know," Lydia said. "You had every right." Ethan shook his head. "No, I had every right to be hurt. But I forgot that fear can make prisoners out of good people." Lydia looked toward the cabin door. "I thought this place was keeping me safe. But it was only keeping me alone." Ethan reached for her hand. "You gave me my father back." Lydia's eyes filled with tears. "No," she whispered. "He was always yours. I only gave you the truth." Lydia died 2 mornings later as sunlight filled the cabin window. Ethan buried her beneath a cottonwood tree near the valley, where wildflowers grew in spring. He placed the small wooden bird she had carved years ago beside her grave and promised that her story would not be forgotten. In the months that followed, Ethan restored the cabin. He repaired the roof, painted the porch, and turned it into a shelter for travelers, widows, and anyone who needed a safe place to rest. He named it Samuel's Haven, after the father whose goodness had survived even the longest lie. Ethan no longer rode away from Red Creek. He stayed. He helped neighbors. He opened his heart to people he once kept at a distance. And every sunset, when the golden light touched the hidden valley, he remembered the fragile woman in the brown jacket who had trusted him with a key. She had arrived at the edge of death, carrying a secret that could have destroyed him. Instead, she changed his world forever. If this emotional Wild West story touched your heart, please like the video and subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories of courage, healing, hidden truths, and second chances.